Hello, you've reached Heaven's Help Desk. My name is Curtis. I will be answering questions today. Really excited to get to do this. We've got a great panel. Hi, Cara. Hi, Cara, and hi, Chelsea.
Hello.
Howdy.
What we're going to do today is answer questions that were pre-submitted by members. So thanks to members for being members. If you want your question in the next show, you can become a member and then submit it yourself. We'll try to answer these the way we think they would really get answered if you did call up to heaven and got the opinion of people living in heaven. So we'll do our best. This is question number 1 from Kenneth, who asks, I know that it is good for me to pray because it helps me in many ways. But when I pray for someone else, even someone I may never meet, is it any help to them? If so, how does it help them? Okay, pray. Good to pray. Can it beam across the void or the ether to someone else?
Yeah, what Swedenborg talks a lot about is that prayer is speech with God, and that really does important work within ourselves when we pray. And praying for others, it's not like that's going to change God's mind, like God wasn't paying attention to what they needed and you're going to alert God that they need something. But it does add to, adds our loving energy to a network that God works through, the angels and spirits. And a quick thing I want to refer to, there's this good article on Swedenborg.com called The Magical Power of Prayer by Reverend Jeremy Simmons. And he points out that Swedenborg does say that angels are able to communicate their goodness to another and blessedness, communicate good feelings, which can include comfort and support to each other. And it's a very real thing in the level of spirit that we do affect each other's spheres. So that's how I picture like praying for someone else is doing that, because our spirits are in the spiritual world and we can be sending our good feelings, good thoughts to them in spirit by praying for them. There's my thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I was thinking along the same lines around auras. That's the word that comes to my mind with what you were describing, Karin, and that there is that praying for someone else is a shift in your own aura, and then that has a positive effect on others. And then the other piece that comes to my mind is it can shift your own receptivity to the influence of the divine and angels. By opening yourself up, you're becoming more receptive to kind of that subtle guidance that Swedenborg says angels are always wanting to influence us with in our day-to-day choices and everything. So it may not be super direct, we don't necessarily understand how that, how we might be being guided, but if we're opening ourselves up to that sort of receptivity of heaven through praying for others, I think that does good in the world around us. So.
Well, I got to say, too, that I'm a big believer in anecdotal evidence. And many friends of mine who have been going through tough times say it absolutely makes a difference to know that other people are praying for them. So I don't know how they feel that, but they testify that it is the truth. And when I think about praying for others, I just think of, I'm sort of lifting that person, me, and the Lord all together, and we're just doing the where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there am I in the midst of them. That's how I like to think of it.
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. It's kind of like some things you can directly impact, and other things all I can do is sign a petition, which doesn't change it, but it does something to the consciousness. So maybe that some of that praying is more people want this to happen, somehow that can do something. But yeah. Good, Kenneth, that you're thinking about how to help people that you may never even meet. That's the right intent. Okay, let's go. Question number 2. This is from Stephanie, who asks, can someone in the spiritual heaven transcend to the celestial heaven? Okay, we got the Swedenborgian layers of the afterlife going on here. I believe Swedenborg said no, but Van Dusen said yes in his books. That would be Wilson Van Dusen, probably in books published by the Swedenborg Foundation. And I remember that Swedenborg said that although those who died as children all went to heaven, they could not achieve entry into the highest celestial heaven, That always seemed unfair to me, and I don't understand why. Could you clarify this for me? A couple of questions in there. Yeah, what's the answer? Cara.
I was surprised by that second statement. It didn't feel true to me about children unable to attain the celestial. So I just cracked open Heaven and Hell to the chapter on children in heaven. And it didn't say anything about that. It talked about that children, like everybody else, are either of a spiritual type or a celestial type. And they grow up in heaven, and then they're led into their own sort of heredity. So they get to have that chance of the feeling of what it is to be human and to deal with those kinds of influences. But I didn't see anything that said there's a limit on where those people can go. They do get the advantage of being raised in heaven, but then they get to have a chance to act on their spiritual freedom to experience this equilibrium in some way, so that they can make a future.
I didn't fact check, but like my mind went like, I think it's the opposite, but maybe I'm curious if Cara knows, but like that Swedenborg maybe says somewhere that children go to the highest heaven. That's like where they sort of rocket there or something. And then as they develop in the spiritual world, they kind of come down and find their spiritual home. But set the record straight, Karin. I want to know.
Well, what I'm finding, first of all, Stephanie, Swedenborg doesn't say that about that children can't go to the highest heaven. Definitely they can. Technically, it's interesting. The nuance that I find in there is Swedenborg saying that children go to, it's kind of technically the outskirts of heaven, because they need to have the chance to actually become angels. But it is an area of heaven. In one place, Swedenborg says it's like right here in the grand human, directly under the Lord's gaze. It's totally influenced by the highest heaven, because that is the heaven of innocence. So they're like right under the auspices of the Lord's innocence and the highest angel's innocence. And technically they start out on the outskirts of heaven, because a full angel is someone who has has grown up and understands what it is to be in a heavenly mindset and does that. But absolutely, they can go to the highest heaven. It seems like they could go to either the celestial or the spiritual heaven. That's what you were referring to, Cara, that they can discover their own nature and highest love from who they are. But those are the highest, those are the higher heavens, so it seems they always go to either one of those. And I'll just say about the other part of the question about that, can you go up in levels in heaven? And I talked about that in a show we have in our library called The Consequences of Crossing Heaven's Boundaries. And I did find it a number, like Swedenborg so often gives these generalities, sort of the general way things are. And in that sense, he is trying to explain, like, you don't just decide one day, oh, I want to go up a level in heaven of these three, because it's such a different state of mind. And so the general thing is you settle into the perspective that is the most comfortable, and the level of the relationship with God that's the most comfortable, and you like it there, and so you don't stay. But in that show, The Consequences of Crossing Heaven's Boundaries, I read a number that talks about people don't go up levels unless they, and it's, like open up to a higher perspective, basically, in my own words, which involves like really willing to let go of this previous perspective and go through a process to open up, to a higher way of thinking and loving. And so, yes, people can do it if they want to. But that statement is more about the generality. Generally, people settle in, where they want to go, and they stay there because they love it. It's home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cara.
Just quickly, I feel like we're not going to feel stuck.
No,
We're not going to feel trapped. We're going to be where our spirit needs and wants to be. So to me, there's this worry behind that question. Like, it's going to be unfair. And I just don't think it's going to be. That's all.
Yeah. And the sort of PS I had on that too was like another underlying thing to understand that Swedenborg describes in all of this is that we have mapped on us all of heaven. So we have, a whole human being has all the levels of heaven inside of us. And depending on where our consciousness generally lives, most of the time, that might be on this level or that level. And, and there's lots of things Swedenborg says about sort of our spiritual home versus going away from it for a time or whatever. But like, you have all the levels. And I just loved how you said that, Karin, of, that sort of accept, if you do want to open yourself up, there's a process that happens that is a real change in sort of your loves and the truth and wisdom that you have inside of yourself. So that's what changes.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I want to say to Kara's point that, it's never, it can't possibly be in heaven that you are feeling like, oh, I wish I could go higher, but I can't, because you either love where you are, or there's if there's any discontent, that is indicating a change is needed, and you will be led along that change. So no worries of ever anybody like, darn, I want to go somewhere else, but I can't.
I'm trying to think of where Stephanie might have got the impression. The only time I know of in Swedenborg's writings where he's critiquing children who, came to the spiritual world as children, he talks about how they do lack a certain kind of worldly experience that we have, so that they have a sort of naivety about them, and that's the reason why we don't just all die as children, because you need a lot of people that have this sort of all the work we put in here. I wonder if that's where she was thinking of that. Okay, great. Well, let's before we go to the next one, I just want to point out to everybody that this program today and all the programming on this channel and everything Swedenborg.com and beyond, it's all brought to you by the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation. So we are able to do what we do because of donations from members like you who ask the questions, but anyone who's watching, if you want to make a difference to our organization, there's a little link that we have. Click that to donate. It's in the description. And your gift will help make this kind of programming possible. It also supports the translations of Swedenborg's works that we do. It helps get this message out to the world. So if you're feeling like supporting this, easy way to do it there. Okay, on to the next question. This one is from Vershanable, who asks, would you explain Ephesians 6:12? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Thank you. I feel like a lot of people quote that number. What does it mean?
Yeah, I'd love to read the full verse here. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And I didn't find like Swedenborg directly commenting on this, but I think it's just a fantastic description of what the real battle is against, not against each other, but against spiritual forces that would want to stir up wickedness in us, hatred, revenge, despair, all these things that that is the enemy, so we're not wrestling against, we're not supposed to be wrestling against each other as people. We're flesh and blood. We're supposed to be, confronting these spiritual forces that stir up things that divide us and make us miserable and things like that. So that's what that verse says to me.
Nice.
Yeah, and the next verse talks about taking up the whole armor of God in this fight against principalities and powers. So to me, that means what is divine truth. Get a hold of whatever divine truth you can to hold against the onslaught of the hells, basically.
Yeah. And to me, in the most general sense, what I hear in this verse and what I take away from it is sort of one of the things Swedenborg writes about how the spiritual world is the cause and origin of things, not this world. So like and the spiritual world is like what's real, like that's what's really going on. All of this matter, physical matter, is the means for us to engage in this spiritual reality that is playing out, that has to do with our will and understanding and everything. And so that's it's not just about the material struggles, but there's like a spiritual purpose and layer under it all. And that's kind of the Bible and Swedenborg and all these sort of spiritual traditions are trying to raise our consciousness up to be aware and to think on that level of things. Yeah.
Made me think as well of when Swedenborg describes angels and angels' attitude toward hell. You'd think angels are kind of the opposite of hell. They might feel like, oh yeah, this is our team, that's their team, and I can think of these 4 people in hell that I really don't like. But that angels don't ever think about hell in terms of people; they just think about it in terms of attributes. So they'll think about, well, there's what makes hell. It's not Janie and Jerry, Susie, it's like it's hatred,
right?
It's vengeance.
Yeah, right.
And the same thing when Swedenborg is being examined by angels, that they just discount his evils and falsities, so they don't attach it to the person. So they're focused on, like, if they have like a battle plan drawn up, there's not people on it. There's, okay, we got to get rid of this, murder, adultery, vengeance, like the whatever. So maybe that's part of it.
I like that. I like that way of putting it.
Any other thoughts on that? Great. Let's go. Let's do another one. We're making good time here. We can get through all of these questions. Great questions so far. Had some good comments along the bottom. David Moffat said that the real battle is within.
Yeah, I've been noticing those comments. I'm not responding out loud, but I am noticing and loving everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, and when I saw that the real battle is within, it just makes me think, yeah, that's one of the main messages in Swedenborg, is that you're meant to apply the Bible, everything, to yourself. Like, that's where you really do the most good. You can approximately get a sense of maybe where other people are spiritually, but you never really know. The real benefit you can bring is to apply the ideas to your inner world. Okay, this is question number 4. It's from Stephen Ball, who asks, how do you regain the purpose of your life, a strength to face life again, if you can't see the reason to live because of unresolved guilt or split psyche, conflict between your conscious and the suppressed, unintegrated part of you? I assume deeper, very fundamental and very spiritual interchange would be necessary, but how? I've tried doing something useful and it kind of works, but I'm having a hard time finding a strength within me which would help me to continue to do it, which will change me from inside. So some struggles going on there, some heavy, deep part of the human experience. Does anyone have any thoughts on what we could offer here?
Yeah, my heart goes out to you, Stephen Ball, and I feel like I want to remind you that one thing hell wants to do is guilt trip you. Always. And there is so much false guilt that hell stirs up in a person. That's false messaging. This is the head bullies. Hell's agenda, one of the agendas or qualities of hell is to try to shut you down. And you have to, like you say, unresolved guilt, which indicates to me something that happened a while ago. And a terrible thing hell does to us often is guilt trips you for something that just already happened, and you can't change that it happens, but keep making you want to feel guilty about it, even if if you already know, that's not who I am anymore. That's not what I want to do anymore. So to see that, I hear you about, we often, or Curtis often talks on this channel about how, doing something useful is a really great tool for trying to, get out of these negative feelings. But there's a thing that has to be confronted as false in you, because it's going to keep messing with you no matter what you do outwardly. So I would encourage you to reflect on that. That's a false message, that they're just saying you are bad. I don't know what the thing is that they're telling you that you're bad about, but it's not true. It's we all, are imperfect and need to keep working to change. But the false guilt, what heaven wants is you to think about things either that you've done or that are issues now, and think, that I want to work on that. I want to do better at that. But hell wants you to just get stuck in guilt, and you just are a mess, and you're bad, and there's nothing you can do about it. And no matter what you do, you're still. So that's a false guilt. There's a false guilt, and that is something to pray about. Pray for the Lord's strength to turn away and see it as false. So there's my thoughts about that.
Hey, Stephen Ball, we see you in the comments there.
Yeah, Stephen. Thanks, Karen. I just came across the passages today that we're talking about. We don't need to confess our sins to the Lord. We don't have to list them all out. He's with us. He knows. And it says the prayer that we could try is, help me, Lord. I see what I've got here. Help me, turn away from it. Lead me to good. That's it. Like, there's nothing about guilt or shame or anything. It's like, okay, I see what's on my plate. Give me a hand.
Mm-hmm.
So unresolved guilt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My heart goes out to you for that. And maybe that can lift.
Yeah, he's asking, even if the wrongdoings were genuinely bad, if I'm stuck at my, again, it seems like you're talking about in the past. I mean, it's always like Jesus says, just like, okay, right now, go forward and do your best. Don't let hell keep pulling you back to something, I hope you can see the difference.
Yeah. And something else I'll just add to, I just resonate with that language of a split psyche, like something that I've been, learning a lot about, that I've mentioned here, I think on this show, is the internal family systems model, which is, it understands ourselves as a system of parts, which really lines up with what Swedenborg says about the different levels that we have an inner self and an outer self, and bringing the outer self into relationship with our inner self is the work of regeneration. And that outer self needs to be willing to kind of let go of its ideas, and kind of surrender and open and soften to the influence of the inner self, which is really, the inner self is this loving, compassionate energy that totally understands, can like give you a perspective on what happened in the past, like can even visit the past with you and help you see, like, I see what was going on there, like this is not, there's not some eternal, condemnation, that has to live in your heart because of whatever it was, like that's available to us. And some, even just remembering that, like it's those things in our outer self, like the clouds have to clear and you can open up to that energy that is in your inner self. And there's different ways to connect with that. One question I love that I come back to is like, what is the most loving way I can hold this? If it's not the most loving way, then there's still some energy of your outer self in it that maybe thinks you need to be punished for it, or thinks you really deserve to have to X, Y, and Z. So it's like, you can imagine what is really the most loving way. and then what is in me that is resisting allowing myself to open up to that love, because that's where the sort of tenderness and compassion comes in, of like, oh, I'm not even willing to let myself feel that I could possibly be loved and forgiven, and like have just this cheerleader squad of angels just being like, go Swedenborg, go, and like, but you do have that available to you. And oftentimes what ends up happening is you need to feel grief. Like you need to actually feel the grief that you're holding on to. And part of our resistance to going in there is like that those parts of us don't want to let go into those feelings, but when you let yourself feel the feelings, that's that softening, this like point of despair that Swedenborg talks about, that like actually is what opens you up to letting that loving perspective flow in. So it's like, it's a real thing. You're on this journey, and like, you've got angels on your side, you're not alone in this. And the other fun thing is that we have a book coming out about this in just a few months, called Opening the Inner World, and it explores Swedenborg and internal family systems. And I'm super excited about it as kind of like that sort of how-to kind of book that I feel like a lot of viewers and listeners on Off the Left Eye have asked us for. Like, how do I make this practical? How do I use this in my life? And I feel like when you bring Swedenborg and IFS together, it really becomes very useful. So I'm thinking of you, Stephen Ball, being reconnected with that purpose. Like, your purpose is there. It's just behind clouds right now, like it's still real and it's inside of you. And as those clouds clear, it's not gone. It's not deteriorating, like your purpose and beauty is totally there. So I look forward to you being reconnected to that.
Making me cry over here, Chell. Thanks.
Yeah. Just want to follow up on that, because that's so beautifully said, Chelsea, and I really look forward to the book. And you made me think about the difference between regret and guilt, like that grief you're talking about. You can regret, and we sometimes do have to regret and be sad about something we did in the past and everything, but that's different than guilt, which is keeping you bad forever and ever and ever, and unless that were to disappear somehow. And the wonderful thing is, mistakes from the past are so useful to becoming more solid in your inner self, like you're saying, that like what you want to be, your purpose. And so those can turn into gifts. And, and Stephen Ball just put up there that he had a short experience, an hour-long experience of feeling that, I assume you mean the guilt shift off your chest for a little bit, and then it was back. But remember that moment. That was a gift from God showing you like, no, this is how I want you to go. And, and the last thing is just I'm thinking of Curtis's show a while back called 3 Simple Ways to Love Everyone, and we're called to, for someone else, consider the background and what they were dealing with and everything, like, like not just like one action, but the whole picture. And that's what you were also talking about too, Chelsea, that we need to do that for ourselves too. Like, bring in that compassion, like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that when I was 23, but I was younger and this was going on, and just like have some compassion at the same time as you don't want to do that again or be that again, but also have compassion. You didn't have all the tools yet.
Yeah. And I saw Stephen Ball saying about his chest, and like, I didn't catch the totality of that comment, but that's Swedenborg, he experienced all of his parts through his body. Like, they're very much connected to our body. So we kind of have to and I think it's very personalized too. There are things where Swedenborg talks about, the chest, our heart, like love and lungs, wisdom, things like that. But it's kind of this beautiful system that your parts are mapped onto your physical body. And so that's actually a way for you to be in relationship with them. Like Swedenborg says how the divine needs something outside of itself to love. Like, that's sort of inherent to a relationship. You need to have 2 things for love to go between. And within our own system, by feeling the guilt or wherever it is, if it's in your heart, that's where you can extend love. Like you have a point to extend the love to, and that's kind of an empowering thing too. So it's not just this abstract thing. You can even like put your hands where you feel it, that those are all really, it's just kind of cool, our design and how our physical body is a map of our spirit. So that's like totally cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great answers, everybody. I had one closing thought on it, which was not in the original question, but a comment flashed along the bottom where Stephen Ball was saying that the guilt, the guilt that keeps, is that from hell? And I like trying to find out what's heaven, what's hell, or what's useful and what's not useful. It's like full-time pursuit in my life, and sort of like the goal of achieving nirvana is to figure out like what's good for you, what's not good for you. I do think it's worth noting that Swedenborg has this very striking depiction of the difference between heaven and hell, which is the angels put a good interpretation on everything that they see in you, and hell tries to sniff out and condemn you for evil. That's the delight of hell's life, is to find evil in you and condemn you. Swedenborg never talks about God condemning people. So the only thing that's not hell that would cause you to feel upset about some kind of evil you did is your conscience. But from everything I know about conscience, that's something that happens during the act. Like I'm doing this thing. Wait, this is violating my conscience. I probably shouldn't do it. So I would think anything that's trying to sit there and say, remember that thing you did that back then that you can't take back, you can't undo. You've already done what you can do. You're bad because of that. That sounds like hell to me. And that sounds like the way hell operates based on what I know secondhand about heaven and hell. Hey, let's go. Let's do another one. We gotta keep it rolling. We got a lot of great new questions to go through. This is question number 5 from Greg. Greg asks, I watched with delight how this effort has grown in recent years. The outreach to like-minded influencers is no doubt part of the reason. Curtis's recent exegesis of the teachings on Heather Tesh channel, for example, was brilliant. Thank you. Concise. Oh, thank you. And should be bottled and distributed en masse. I am curious about further networking plans. Are there? If so, what? So he's referencing, there's a show called Beyond with Heather Tesh that I recently got to be a guest on, which is a great channel. You guys can all go check it out. I'll just quickly say that, yes, we try to do those interviews whenever we can. Networking stuff that's coming up. I'm going to be speaking at a conference. Then Jonathan and I are going to have an event at the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution in May in Florida, in West Palm, if you guys want to come out there. And then we're always on the lookout for more interviews. So those are a couple. Chelsea, I know you already mentioned you're networking with Robert Falconer from IFS. Do you want to say another quick word about
Sure.
how that's connecting in?
Yeah, so the Opening the Inner World is co-authored by an IFS therapist named Robert Falconer, who wrote a book called The Others Within Us. So it sort of takes IFS that talks about the multiplicity of our parts and extends it to really, his thesis is like, we need to understand our minds as inherently porous, like that things can flow in and flow out. And that's also very much aligned with Swedenborg. So he's the co-author with Jonathan Rose and myself. And so in addition to the book coming out, we're going to be having a course at some point this year, sort of an event that you'll be able to sign up for that will probably be Bob Falconer and myself talking about IFS and Swedenborg. And so he's a really great teacher, super amazing IFS therapist. So I'm excited for y'all to get to know him, and you can go get to know him now. I think his website is like robertfalconer.us. He has other courses, in other places too. So that's an exciting connection.
And we do have a list. We do have a target podcast list that we made. So the names on it are all secret, but it's podcasts that we're going to try to go and become guests on to get more of that sort of networking effect that you're talking about. So yeah, stay tuned. We will try to have that kind of multiplier effect. Oh, Carmen, were you going to say something?
Yeah, there's also an event. Sheila Robinson Kiss is someone who has come on with us into our events, and she's doing, she's a author, speaker, therapist who loves Swedenborg, and she's doing an event in Bernath in late May. I think the Swedenborg Foundation community members have been informed about that. But if anyone's interested in checking that out, contact us, info@swedenborg.com.
Yeah.
Networking. Okay, let's do the next question. This is from Olivia, who asks, I really enjoy watching this channel. Most of the content gives me hope and joy, but whenever the topic of motivation and intention comes up, I start to feel discouraged. My reasons for doing good things aren't always purely selfless. They come from a mix of different motivations. This makes me question whether it's even possible to have completely pure intentions all the time, and it leaves me feeling disheartened. I'd appreciate any advice on this. Thanks for your efforts. I really appreciate you guys. Okay. Well, thank you. Glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, let's clear this motivations thing up, because we all have good motivations all the time.
All the time.
No.
That's why we're the help desk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Olivia, it sounds like you are a human being.
Yeah.
And that, God alone is perfect. The rest of us are a mixed bag. Even it sounds like in heaven, we've got stuff. We've got our evening states, But Swedenborg says, it's like all we have to do is just tip the dial a little bit towards goodness and sort of be aiming that direction, and our mixed motives will get worked out. Swedenborg has a term called mediate goods, which means things that in themselves aren't the best thing in the world, but they're getting you towards heaven. They're aiming towards heaven. So a spurious conscience, it sounds like. I mean, like overactive conscientiousness, like Kathy said in the chat earlier. Be easy on yourself. The Lord loves you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So good. And I'll say an analogy of this thing about paying attention to your motivations and the motivation, like coming from selfless motivations. You got to think of that as a North Star, not as like you're supposed to be doing that right now. And like you both were saying, nobody all the way gets there. God is the only perfect one. And think of an analogy of being able to play the violin beautifully. If you want to learn to play the violin beautifully, you have that goal of having just pure notes come out of your bow. But if you absolutely can't, you don't start out that way. And it's a very long process and the very sour notes are helping you to, you're getting better and better at noticing, that was a little off and that was a little off. And so the noticing, what it's supposed to be is not noticing, I wasn't completely selfless in that motivation, so I've failed. No. You're supposed to just gradually be noticing, why did I do that? And let me develop toward that North Star. I feel like Cara said it really well, but it's not about I'm supposed to be there already. Like if somebody learning to play the violin, like I stink because I'm not playing a beautiful, perfect song yet. Instead of I'm learning. And I want to read a little part of this Secrets of Heaven 62:47. So this is talking about shifting from an earlier state of development into a new state of development. The earlier state compared to the new later state is impure, because when we desire truth for the sake of theology, in order to become intelligent, we also desire recognition and glory. So he's specifically talking about your motivation for learning spiritual ideas. Earlier, of course, you do it because it's cool and you want to get smarter and everything. This desire cannot help being present at that stage, and it is permitted as a way of getting started, because such is human nature. When we desire truth for the sake of living by it, though, we reject glory and recognition as goals and embrace goodness in our life or love for our neighbor. So it's permitted and necessary to just be having mixed motivations at first, or we'd never get started. We'd never even, we can't go from 0 to 100. you have to just have some motivations getting you to do good things that are not pure yet, because doing good things is great and necessary. So don't expect yourself to be at the pure some pure finished state where there's no self focused motives at all. Just enjoy the journey, in the sense of, yeah, I'm just noticing little tiny bits of improvement here and there, and just pat your lower self on the head when it's, of course you want some praise, like you're so funny that way. Have a sense of humor and lightness about it, because it's just being human, like Kara said, and the Lord sees it as that's the necessary way to go. You have to be that way a lot of your journey. There's no other way.
Yeah. I think what was coming to my mind, just to tack on here, was like, similarly to what we've said already, of like the whole regeneration path is aligning your outer self with your inner self, is what Swedenborg says. And so like that, or your lower self, higher self, and forever we're not all the way aligned, like regeneration continues forever. So you're on the path, and of course it's going to be a mix, because you are both of those things. You are your inner self and your outer self. So, but like, you're being guided on that journey. So it's like, it's totally normal that you'd be often feeling that pinch of like, oh, I know I've got active outer self, lower self things going on here, and yeah, bringing compassion to that, and understanding, like Karin was saying. So those were a couple
make it till you make it. I mean, that's a phrase one of my friends uses a lot, of like, to not get so caught up in like, was I absolutely pure in that? Like, just do it. and the Lord you're going to get better at what the motivations are, but just keep going.
Yeah, I have wrestled with this myself at times, but now I'm just really lax about it, because I know, like, I've just got my motivations. They just are what they are. It energizes you. Lower self stuff, like, oh, I get some credit or that can energize you sometimes. You're slowly making a change. It's like the change of, you're going to change your whole diet. You can't, if you do, I've tried to do that right away, and your body goes into shock, and then you end up just back where you were. You go nice and slow. There is a part in the writings where Swedenborg says, like, if you want to know if your motivations are good or not. And I was like, yeah, what is it? Just see if you're like shunning evil desires when they come up. And then you'll, like, he doesn't even say you can tell when you do something nice, whether you're doing it nice for the right reasons. It just means overall in your life, are you willing to take a stand against harmful desires and behaviors in yourself? So
when you notice them,
but so you can't really tell in the good stuff.
Right.
You just can't tell. So you just like go do it. The way you progress is to know, like, nobody would notice if I stole that cookie. I'm not stealing it anyway. That's it. That's the best you can do. And I do want to say that I think that there's certain levels. You just can't go past a certain point being a human being in the physical world, because he'll describe how the nature of heavenly love is to love others as much as you love yourself. And in heaven, they love others even more than they love themselves. But you can't do that here, because you so need to take care of your stuff, So it's like you just like, take it easy, and you're probably doing fine. Like, to echo everyone else.
Yes, I think it's related to that false guilt we were talking about with Stephen Ball's thing. Like, hell loves to do that. You've just done something great or useful or whatever, and they'll want to say, oh, did you have any self-focused motivations in there? Well, that ruined everything. No.
You know what else? I've made this joke with a couple of Swedenborgians recently, which is like, well, in the book Divine Providence, it says God can actually do more good through evil people than he can through good people, because they're motivated. So it's like, hey, I'll just do a bunch of good, Hey, speaking of hell, you were just talking about hell. Man, this coming Monday, we got a brand new episode of the Swedenborg Life podcast coming out, and the theme is an exploration of hell. Do we have a picture of that? We got like a scary thumbnail. Yeah. There you go. That's the show coming up, The Truth About Hell. And it actually, we go in here, Karin, when you were writing that show, we talk about the 3 universal characteristics of hell and the difference between it and heaven. So I feel like it's going to be a fascinating episode, and kind of all this questioning we're getting about how do you identify what's right and what's wrong in you. That show will you know, help you with that. You can click the notify button right now and you'll get a reminder when that show pops up.
And the picture reflects the fact that it will include a story about Swedenborg meeting this scary demon, but that was an illustration of some characteristics of hell and how they contrast with the characteristics of heaven. So
yeah, well, you got to have crazy pictures, or else people aren't going to click on it and no one's going to watch it. I mean, that's the reality we live in. Okay, let's go. Let's do the next question. This is from Chinonye, who asks, hello, wonderful people at Heaven's Help Desk. Hope you're doing great. My question is this: do we undergo spiritual crises in the afterlife as we continue to regenerate over there? Or is the spiritual crisis only for this life here? Because it's pretty intense. Thank you.
It is intense. Yeah.
Yes, it is. I'll start. My thoughts on this are whatever spiritual crises we go through in this world, we don't have to go through in the afterlife. So that's a positive way.
Nice.
What you're dealing with in this life, then it's taken care of. Swedenborg had this one quote where he's saying, for good people or people on a heaven-bound path, their evils don't come back after death, because they've already dealt with that. I mean, whatever you've already faced and had a crisis about, good, you don't have to deal with that after death. And then after death, in the world of spirits, there are processes to things you haven't yet addressed and aren't aware of or haven't dealt with. That is a stage of the journey where you will have a chance to do that, and the processes will be more or less intense depending on what's needed. Are you ready to let go of that yet, or will it take some more intense experiences to make you realize you need to let go of it, or will it be a fairly simple thing like, oh yeah, I see it, I want to let go of it? So there are processes in the world of spirits, but that, it's just all for the sake of helping you know what to let go of, something that you didn't address yet in the physical world. And then after that, in heaven, it's not really crises anymore, but gentler ups and downs of just, awarenesses of more or less love, more or less wisdom that help you keep fine-tuning your awareness and your connection with God. So there are my thoughts.
I second everything Karin said. That's all I have to say. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Hey, we had a donation and a membership come in during that, so thank you to both of you for that. Let's do the next question then. So we'll get to every single question today, which is going to be awesome. Mia Metcalf asks, please give more insight into what the different sections of the Bible actually mean. Your explanation of Genesis was a real eye-opener, and the term brother was too. Now I understand that Adam and Eve were a type of people, as is their offspring. Makes more sense than 2 people populating the whole world. Explain the deeper meaning of the Tower of Babel.
Well, we're getting near the end of our hour, so I'm going to jump in here. First of all, say we have a whole show about the Tower of Babel, so look up When Religion Went Wrong. And we also have other shows, so you could, if you want to post a comment to ask about a particular Bible story, I could see if there's a show already made. But just a quick run through the Tower of Babel. The people all had one language, means this is harking back to a time where there was a single view of doctrine in the ancient church, in the ancient times of humanity. And they settled in a valley, means it started, this unified spiritual perspective started to back away from charity and started to become corrupted. And they they started to build a tower out of brick instead of stone, so out of man-made ideas instead of God-inspired ideas. And they were baked, meaning from evil, like self-centered passions, using tar instead of mortar, evil cravings instead of goodness. And so they were building a tower, trying to elevate this perspective, this human-made perspective, to as if it were godlike or truth, divine truth. And so God came down to see means there had to be a judgment to break this up, so that it didn't destroy the human race, basically, because on that trajectory, human beings would have disconnected themselves from heaven and destroyed each other. So the people had one language, which means a united perversion of truth. And that needed to change. And so in the story, the muddling of the language that God is said to have do is to allow their confusion, their knowledge to start getting a little more confused, and seeing things a little differently and starting to not understand each other, so that the united effort to basically overthrow truth, like replace divine truth with something human made, could not continue in that way. It needed, they needed to break up their efforts into different languages, different ways of thinking. So that's just sort of a very quick run through. If anyone else wants to comment on that. But
got it, honey.
That's great.
It's good.
Okay.
But yeah,
hey.
show when religion went wrong.
Excellent. And thanks, JP Collins, for gifting those Off the Left Time memberships.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's do question number 9. This is Stephanie, who asks, in what ways do meditation and dreaming differ in regards to our access and communication with the spiritual world? When I dream, it seems I have less control over my experience than when I meditate. Is one better than the other? Let's settle the debate once and for all.
Oh, well, I'd love to hear. Chelsea's the one most knowledgeable about meditation, but they seem to me to be performing just very different functions. They both are connections with the spiritual world, but one is more passive. Dreams happen to us, and meditation is more, conscious as far as our part in it. They both have usefulness. What do you think, Chelsea?
Yeah. I was thinking of what Swedenborg says about how, in a couple of different places, I think he says, when your outer senses turn off, your inner senses awaken. He said, so that he describes that being like, yep, when you go to sleep, your eyes are closed, your inner senses wake up, and that's dreaming, and being, I think that can also happen in other ways. But so there is that can be a very sort of spiritual, experience. We can have spiritual world experiences in our dreams. And yeah, the difference, as I see it too, is that, right, it's often more passive, like you're saying, Karin, in dreams, and it's one-sided. You're just in a dream. You're not in this world at the same time. And the sort of beauty of our consciousness and design in this world is that we have this dual awareness. Swedenborg says we're designed to have this consciousness in this world and to be connected to the spiritual world at the same time, and even be these go-between, between the two, to have that connection. And so I think that's what makes there's a specialness about meditation and other practices where you sort of have that deeper connection while being still having your, as you might say, like your outer self awake, is connected. So that sort of consciousness, I think, is really great. But I don't know if one is exactly better than the other. They're just different, and they both kind of influence our overall experience of being as beings that have, one part of us in the spiritual world and other parts in the physical world or lower levels of consciousness. And yeah, those are the thoughts that came to me about that one.
Mhm.
Love it. That's great. Let's before we do the last question, I just want to remind people we're a not-for-profit. If you want to make a donation, we have a handy donation link. People are scrambling to push the button, and there it is, swedenborg.com/livegive, and that will 100% of your donation there will go right to the programming that we're doing. I thought we could end with one more chance for me to mispronounce someone's name. So this is Brian Placatius, who asks, I know the Gnostic Gospels were unknown during Swedenborg's lifetime. Have any present-day Swedenborg scholars, such as yourselves, ever read and evaluated these documents, and is there a place for them in the new church? Many thanks. You people are super great. We think you're super great, too. What's the answer?
A long time ago, I read some of the Gnostic Gospels, and I have not studied them, but I was just enjoyed some of the symbolism in there. And I feel about the Gnostic Gospels like any other religious literature or scripture out there, that there's always value in reading things and seeing what God can say to you through them. And comparatively, like, it's great when you can notice, oh, here's, if you're into Swedenborg's writings, like, oh, this concept is, I find that in here too, in these scriptures, and also in the symbolism itself. It's fun to notice the parallels in the symbolism. Like, I was just taking a recent look at the Gospel of Thomas, which I remember having a lot of symbolism in it. And I just love this phrase in it, in the Gospel of Thomas. It says, Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion which becomes man when consumed by man, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes man." And I just, it was just fun to think about that correspondential symbolism when we take in, as a human mind, we take in the lion, like the power of truth, then that's a good thing. But if just sort of power consumes us as humans, that gets backwards, then power is in charge. So just things like that, it can be fun and useful. But I see them in the same category as all these other wonderful scriptures that one could study and look at the symbolism through the eye of correspondences. I guess that's the fun thing that Swedenborg gives us to work with.
Any rebuttals to that? Okay, we did it. We got through our questions. I wonder if we have 2 minutes left, but maybe everyone could just end with a closing thought. Do we want to do closing thoughts?
I'll start with, I had a couple other thoughts about the dreams versus
Go
meditation. Since we have a little time, was it's fun that, I love what Chelsea was saying about meditation is more, it's more purposeful, like you're more voluntarily involved, and that's cool. And dreaming part of it seems to be like while you're sleeping, you're getting your things sort of worked out and worked through in your spirit, in your mind, in a way that almost like you were put to sleep under anesthesia and the doctor's working on you, whereas meditation is more, you're awake and involved. So it's just fun to, like you said, Chelsea, I don't think one's better than the other. They're just different functions, both that are helping us.
And I think, go ahead.
And I love, my last thing to say is I loved all these questions. Thank you, everybody. But what were you going to say, Chelsea?
Just that, I think they both reflect like that we have this relationship with our inner world, and so dreaming is one of those ways that we just are always in relationship with that, and you can kind of explore that. It's been interesting in my experience as I've been, getting to know my own parts. I'll sometimes have a dream and I'll realize that was like a part communicating to me through a dream around concerns that it has, so it's another way to kind of be in relationship with ourselves, in like a in understanding what's going on for us, or, you know, being led to new perspectives on things. And so it just sort of points to, you know, that whole idea that we're spiritual beings having a whatever physical experience or something. Yeah. And so I feel really happy that I got to be here today. And I just love the energy of being with you all. And so I feel filled up. So thanks.
Nice. My closing thought is that when I take a look at these questions that get submitted, I think they're all so amazingly individual and scattered all over the place. And then every time during the hour, I find out they're all so interconnected. Like every question is related to the other. I feel like, well, yeah, we just talked about that 3 months ago. And that's just a fun thing to observe. And thanks for coming along on the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to everybody watching, everybody who commented, and to my 3 fellow panelists. This was super fun. Till next time, everyone. And community members, there's going to be a Zoom chat afterwards, so we can get to hear your thoughts about everything. If you're a community member, click that link. We'll see you like now. I'm going now upstairs to go get to my computer. So, okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.